Hey there everyone, Ted Simpson here, ready to show you a great little painting today. What do we got? Of course we've got our 16 by 20 black canvas, and we're going to cover the whole thing with, just a hint of this liquid clear. You can see here a little bit goes a long way. So, just been sitting around here today, just overthinking what I wanted to do today. I tried just trying to look for a random episode generator that would be easy enough to see, or I don't know. I ended up just Googling a random number between 1 and 31, and then between 1 and 13, and I got a nice little episode there. 21.3 is what I got in my random search, and then, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do that one. And then I decided I'm going to try to up my game a little bit here, and I've got my phone running a second recording, and let's see if I can't do some reels. Try to up my engagement. I really appreciate you guys watching these episodes here. I know I've got a core group of 4 or 5 of you that comment on my videos, and I always like and appreciate that. My viewership overall, I really don't know. I'm not trying to make a huge living on the ad revenue here, and if you do get the ads there, I am monetized, so I try to make a buck or two. But I really don't think I've really made much more than $100 for all the videos that I've done since I've been monetized, and certainly doesn't even pay for the supplies it took to paint the paintings that we have ads for. So no big deal. I'm doing it not just for maybe a buck or two. I do it to practice. I do it to come up with new ideas. Sometimes just talking them out while I'm painting gives me some interesting variations on things I wasn't even thinking about. So, I'm putting on some Indian yellow here. I know it's a little tough to see, but we'll do our best. Just kind of a stripe across the middle there. And following that, I'll break out a brand new tube of alizarin crimson. Get a little bit of that crimson up there. Feels pretty good. Now this crimson is a little on the transparent side, just like the Indian yellow. So let's drop some crimson in here. I overlapped the yellow just a little bit. Now I'm getting a little rough and tough here. Just loading some paint on the brush really roughly. You can sweep or grind it in. And the trick is, move on. Now I'm going to put a little bit wider stripe of crimson than I did yellow, both on the top and the bottom. Look at that. Using up some paint here. Now, for our final undercolor here, we'll use a little bit of the phthalo blue. You knew that was coming, I bet. Now, I'm not bothering to clean my brush here. This blue is pretty strong. It'll eat up a bit of that crimson, maybe even give us a little bit of a lavender feel to it. And I'm going to drop this in right across the top there. Get a little more and let it come down, and it might overlap that crimson a little bit, give us some lavenders up in there. We'll see. That's the goal. Gently pulling some down here. Work some of that blue into the brush. There we go. You can see it goes on pretty quick. Now the blue, of course, is also very transparent. Maybe you can see the easel is starting to turn blue. Oh, you know I'm getting some on there because it's so hard to see the canvas. Maybe a little more up there. I'm letting it mix in with that crimson. There we go. I think we got it. And I just did a whole series of black canvases in my classes. And still the best way, I'm just randomly pick out a spot maybe right there. If your finger comes back dirty, you've got enough paint on it. You know, you don't need to keep working it. That was yellow, it was there. So where is my bucket? I had a bucket for cleaning brushes earlier. It's just not over by my easel. So, just to save a little bit of my cleaning power here, let's wipe off some of the excess paint first. Then I'll go into my bucket. And swishing against that screen all over there. Swishing and squeezing and getting the rest out. And where's my bucket? Boy, that's over here too. You could tell once again, Captain Prepared here. So I think, even though I just cleaned that 2-inch brush, I think just with the smaller canvas here, I'm going to start out putting some of our titanium white on, but I'm going to use the 1-inch brush instead. So, got my fresh tube of titanium white. And gently pulling some of that color, not too far up the brush, but deep in those bristles. Getting some of this titanium white up in there. And here I go. Kaboom. Putting it on, just focusing on the yellow right now. Letting it fade off. You see how bright? Gets a little darker as we move away. I'll load a little more, get some of that white right there. Now, this is the important bit. Don't go back. Only go up and out. Don't want to go back into the yellow. We want to keep it all nice and pretty. So I still have paint in my brush, and I'm just making some X's here. I think I'm just about out. I got some glare going on here. Still got a little bit out there. Working my way up and out into that blue. There we go. Immediately going to clean the brush. We'll see how that does for us. See what you think. How many times do you want to do this? It's up to you. I'm really cleaning some extra paper towel scrubs, a little wrap on the easel before going back into the white. Get it nice and clean and dry. Now, if I do this step again, everything's going to get a shade lighter. See that? just working from the center out. I'm going to load a little bit more color. Focus on this bright spot. And then, once again, working my way out with these crisscross strokes, X's. Those different directions is what makes this easy to blend. If you're just kind of winging it back and forth or just doing the same angles back and forth, it does make it tougher to get the brush marks out before we run out of undercolor to blend. I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. Leaving those corners just a little bit dark. Okay. Now, if that's bright enough for you, then we just go over it with the clean dry brush. This time using very, very light strokes. We don't really need to overwork it. You'll kind of dig that paint right off the canvas. What I'm trying to do is these little X's and these light touches. You can see those brush marks. There's a little bit of black canvas there. But when you go over it, it'll flatten and fill in some of those areas if you're quick and if you're brief. Does that make sense? The more you do it, the bigger the chance that it's just going to make marks again. So that's all nice and soft. There's some spots that I can see because I'm this close to it. There's some spots I can see, but when you take a step back, you won't see them. That's why I'm moving on. Going into my crimsons, lots of little crisscross strokes, little X's, wiping out my brush occasionally, and I'm just going over each step, only working from the inside out, light to dark, from the bottom up. Maybe that makes more sense. And there we go. This is all nice and dark. It doesn't need too much work here. There we go. Now, of course, I got all this blue in my brush. I want to wipe my brush before going back and doing any final blends, if they're needed, that is. You might be all set as is and just go ahead and stop. But what I'm going to do, kind of like where we blend water reflections here, sometimes Bob will take that brush and give these long, even strokes right across the whole thing. Take out any lingering brush marks. There we go. I'm going to take a little bit of that white out of the yellow out of the white there, and I'm going to take just a tiny bit of white after I get done with this step. Let me get a little bit of crimson, a little bit of blue, and a little bit of white. Just want to make still a dark reddish purple. I've got the sky fairly dark up there. I think when I was watching this episode, I did it a little bit different. And already, because I don't want to go over it and lighten things out anymore, I'm just going to kind of go with what I got. So it might mean that I got to bring my clouds a little bit lower to compensate for being able to see them where the light source is. So I'm going to go into a little bit of this purple color with my fan brush. Not a big amount of color, but across the whole brush here. And maybe just sort of swirl in some basic shapes here. Bob had this whole thing kind of, big old stormy thing kind of coming swinging in from the top. Trying not to overwork it. And he even had, he called it a leg another little leg coming out from this side here. Just getting some color out there, not really overworking it with the fan brush. What I'll do is I'll come back with my 1-inch brush and just gently go over it. Tips of the bristles, keeping that brush moving, softening, just by winding it up. You know, these little circles. Bob liked to say wind up. There we go. Not really trying to mess with it too much there. Get some little semblances of swirlies and cool things happening. You know, sometimes, I don't know if I have to mess with it, but I'm gonna. Maybe a little extra little stringer right there. Maybe a little extra stringer right there. I do like those stringy clouds. Very light, just a couple strokes, and that's all. That's all it needs. Simple enough. So, let's take this purple that I got here. I just made it. I'm going to add a little bit of blue to it. That's going to make it a little richer purple. A little darker blue purple, I should say. And the midnight black, which is also kind of a purpley black. I'm going to add a little bit of midnight black to that purple. If you're ever unsure what color you got, take a little bit of white and your color, moosh them together so the white brings out the flavor, and that's the tone that you get. Get rid of that. That's just for testing. We don't want to put it back into our pile. I like that color. It's just a darker purple. And before I do too much else, I've been burned before, but I'm going to put the caps back on my paint. Get them out of my way. It's really easy to bump the table, the paint goes flying, gets all over the table, the brushes, my hands and arms and everything else. Okay, so what are we going to do? Let's take our 1-inch brush, and I'm just going to tap in. Look at that, look at how the brush bends. See how I'm getting it up here on the top part of the brush? And that allows me to make a little bush shape. Tap some paint on, just tapping, moving the brush from side to side and left and right. See, I'm sort of rotating as I tap just a little bit here and there to make it a little curvy. Putting all this foliage here at roughly the horizon line. When you're doing this, it's okay if you cover up a little bit of any clouds or whatever is in your sky. And I just want to make sure that it's just nice and dark. I don't really want a lot of light coming through the bottom here. Bit of extra tapping anytime you need a little more paint. Look at that, just a little more paint really fills that in and covers up that yellow, gives you a nice little sense of a tree. Maybe we got a bigger tree here. Little arm kind of coming off here. There's something going on there. Sometimes here we'll have a big old one off on the side. Just want to make sure we keep that dark color. There we go. Very cool. Maybe there's another bush, not a super tall tree, but just one that's a little closer. Something like that. There I go. clean that brush again. Already got stuff going on here, don't we? Starting to see a scene develop. You know, before I do too much else, I just realized I could do something here, so why not show you? I'm going to take a clean fan brush here and just a little bit of the liquid white. I'm going to thin down some titanium white. Sort of tap and mix, it doesn't matter, just make it a little thinner. And I'm going to put some stars in here before it's too late. A couple thousand stars is pretty easy to go. Just drop in. Now I think they'd be a little bolder, a little more visible up here in the blue. And then it kind of fades away. Can't really see the stars as we get to the bright spot. So, sun's going down, just the last little bit of light, the stars start showing. I like it. Okay. Already I got 2 brushes I gotta clean that I was just setting aside for now. And I think I'm gonna need a couple of colors here. What's our season? We still haven't decided, right? We can decide anytime we want, right up until the point where it's time to put them in. So I'm gonna get some colors here. Maybe a little bit of green. That's the sap green. And, oh, almost out. Look at that. Just a little bit of the cadmium yellow left in this tube. And what do you say about a little yellow ochre, that nice mustardy yellow? Maybe we're looking at fall here. Who's to say? We'll figure it out. So, I'm going to take just a little bit of that liquid white, and let's thin down some of our titanium white here. What? Cadmium yellow. You knew what I meant. Well, hopefully you were paying attention. Cadmium yellow. A little bit of the green, maybe a little bit of Indian or yellow ochre, maybe a touch of black just to dull things down a bit. Find the color that speaks to you here. Got all these colors worked up into the tips of the bristles. We don't really know what we got. But what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and basically just like these little tiny taps, little tiny stabs. See that? Bob, in at least the episode I was watching, I'm not even sure it was the same one. 21.3. I might have been bouncing around the channels there. Just sort of tapped in with a 2-inch brush. Getting plenty of paint right out on the tips of the bristles. You just tap and make some little clusters, working my way from the top down, reloading the brush for each one of these little bushes. See that? Right there, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And sometimes you just got to stop and remake your pile here. A little bit of this. Ooh, I like this yellow ochre. Tap in, trying to get a nice color cluster here. And just dropping in a little shape. Reload, drop in a little shape. Sometimes you got to reload often. There we go. Now over here, I'm going to switch gears and get back into the brighter colors. A little bit brighter yellow here. Add in some green. There we go. Creating a whole different thing. You change the angle just a little bit, you change the whole effect. Tapping it, working my way down. See how the color just sort of fades away? That gives you the signal that it's time to reload. And when you reload and keep working your way down, you get all these nice little sections of the tree, these canopies almost. Something like that. Now, maybe just a touch of the phthalo blue. There we go. See, a very different looking green. Very different looking. Add some of the other yellows into it. Come on up here and see if we can't change the angles again here and get some different looking things. Make the trees as individual as you want them to be. Okay, just change the angles a little bit on each one of these that you do. You get such great results. Okay, maybe here at the bottom, maybe there's some bushes. So I'm just going to change the shape of my brush. Instead of holding it flat and tapping in like this, I just hold it vertical and tap up and down. Just to add some foliage in front of there. Okay. Maybe another one. Just some bushes. Kind of in this open little pathway here. Now, tappy grass. Step 1 is pulling plenty of color, getting that chiseled edge of your brush. Step 2, pushing forward until you see this little ridge line. And let's go ahead and tap in some grass. Sort of developing the lay of the land here, where the grass begins. Got all this undercolor here, and it's going to definitely change things up. This crimson underneath will mix. If you keep tapping and tapping, it will start to mix and dull the way that crimson and green like. There we go. All right, I'm going to save that grassy brush in case we need it. I'm going to go back to, I got another 1-inch brush here, back to a little bit of this titanium white. And let's create some reflection here. Just gentle press and pull. Press and pull. Working my way out here. Don't look like I have any yellow left, so no worries. Just pushing some paint off here. And then light strokes to blend. Look at that, just all kind of in one here. You could, of course, stop and wipe out your brush if you needed to. If you wanted it brighter, you could go back into that light color and start in your bright spot again. And everything will get a shade lighter. But remember, it is supposed to be a sunset. So we don't need it like Arctic white here. Okay, I'm going to stop and clean out my brush really thoroughly. And then very gentle, I'm going to brush sideways and blur this reflection even more. Ooh, look at that. Alrighty, let's see what we got here. Now, with a little bit of that grass brush, I still have paint in it. Just want to bring that grass down just a little further there in case you need to. Good thing I saved that brush, right? There it goes. Getting right down in there. All these deeper shadows happening all back in here. Oh, you want to fiddle with them, but I urge you not to. I'm going to take a little bit of Van Dyke Brown. Sounds nice. And my palette knife. Pull a little bit out, get a little roll of color on it. Coming in here with the knife relatively flat. I'm literally just rubbing the space between where the grass ends and the reflection begins, not really overloading it, just making it dark. Moving my brush from side to side, that helps keep the lay of the land the way I like it. This is just shadows, the dark parts of the dirt. And look at that, just by cutting up, I'll show you right over here, by cutting up into the grass, creates a little more variation of this earth here. See that? It's not just a little line of dirt. Now I'll take a little bit of white and that brown. We're going to make ourselves a highlight color. And this time I'm going to just lightly graze over it here and there. Very small amount. This is kind of a calm painting here. I'm not looking for thick, mountainy, rocky texture. Grazing over it and sort of hitting it once or twice with a rub as I'm doing this, just to dull the texture down a little bit. There we go. There's that little cut in right here. Oh, there it is. Nice. Now getting the tiny, tiny line of white on my knife. Oh, little water line right there. It's holding the knife flat, just a little bit below center. Touch and bend and saw and move. Touch the full length of the knife. Give it a little pressure so the knife blade bends. I start sawing back and forth and move away from the center. Here we go. Touch, bend, saw, lower the knife as you need to. Keep those water lines looking nice and flat. But you can make little curves. We just don't want to turn the knife sideways and make a bunch of angles and such. Now, let's just say we changed our mind and maybe we want another little peninsula here. Drop it in. This is where we can start kind of doing things a little bit faster and just similar to what we did before. I take a little bit of that white and let's make a reflection here. Now you start to see that land, right? Ooh, I think I was a little off center there, pulling sideways instead of downways. There we go. Now if you don't like the shape, you can always make some adjustments here, something like that. Now this grass I think might get a little wilder as it's closer to us. It might be a little more visible, a little more detail to it. So I'm taking my fan brush and I went into everything. All my yellows here, a little bit of the green, black, doesn't really matter. Back and forth, barely mixing it. And this time I'm going to push up. Bring my handle over and just push up. Push a little firmer. Ooh, and that color just comes off and creates this texture here that just looks so cool. Working my way down. Hit it harder. There, look at that. Greens, yellows, and a little bit of white in there. There it is. Come back, give it a little eyeball test there. There it is. So, this is kind of a little bit on a hill, so maybe there's a little more brown here. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Whatever you like, you can clean up that bottom edge. Maybe something like that. Come back. Still got my highlight color right there. Here we go. Laying it on just a little heavier. Give a sense a little closer to us. A little more texture, a little bolder. And then, last little bits here, I'm just going to push a little bit of this grass right over the top edge of the rock. Make sure, or rock or earth, whatever we're calling it. Just to give it a little sense of the grass is growing down to the water a little. Just, there we go. Look at that. Now, boy, we just keep repeating ourselves. Little bit of a water line here. Whoop, I had a little too much color on the knife. A little too much blade. So let's use the short edge for this tiny piece here. Nice. All right. That says maybe we got a little something right down here at the bottom. What the heck? Some bushes. I'm just going to change this up a little bit. And more liquid white. Going right through the rest of my yellow here. I think a little too much liquid white. It's very pale. So let's try making this a little more greenish yellow ochre-y. Look at that. Look at that texture. You see that lacy texture there? Pulling, stopping, and lifting up. Stop and pop. Give you a sense of what you got. Or just give it a couple of taps. Turn that brush so the bristles, that rounded corner is facing up. Let's put a couple of big old frosty looking ones here. Frosty but green and yellow. I'm just talking to talk at this point. If it was a winter scene, these would be those frosty ice covered bushes, but since it's a summer or fall painting here, kind of green frosty. I don't know. I get a little loopy after a while. Little bits here and there, working my way down. Yeah, there it is. And I'm not sure I have enough. Boy, I almost do. Let's see if we can make it with some black and some brown here. Little roll of paint on the old knife. Let's give this one a little tree. It kind of snakes up over here on the right side, right up into the sky, maybe even over a cloud or two. Look at that. I love that little guy. Focusing on the right side as I was doing, just touching and pulling in. Now if I turn my knife upside down, a little bit of pressure, clean up the left side as best you can, if it needs it. Very, very mellow little tree here. And the mellow tree sometimes has a little branch going off one side. Now, you got to be careful going over this too many times. All we're looking for is some nice dark color. Don't want to make the extra branches thicker than the trunk, right? Let them taper. There we go. Now, a little bit of that brown and white. And maybe let's put a little highlight on this side. I think the light would be striking the left side of this tree, so light little touches. Very little. If you can see some light and dark, it's probably highlighted enough. You don't want to take away all the shadow, do you? It's not usually don't ask that question as a question. Usually it's more of a statement or a guide for you. But feel free to answer that question. Do you really want to cover it all up? And maybe somewhere catching a little bit of light. That last little bit of light a little brighter. Just little highlight right there. There it is. Now, what tree wouldn't be complete without a few extra branches? Let's first extend this one up a little bit. Thin that paint down very, very thin, like ink. One thing I try to tell my students is let these branches grow, you know, rather than just be little stubby ones. Let them grow. Now, I'm not saying you have to do it, but since I got the color right here, I'm going to thin down a little bit of the titanium white and maybe just barely touch a branch or two, and you might get a little highlight on that branch. Not saying you have to go too crazy with it. Just a little bit of contrast there can be nice. Here we go. And while you're doing these trees, of course, you could put in some background little sticks and twigs here using the white or kind of a grayish color. Your purple tones, your black tones, Van Dyke brown, make a couple back here. Deep in the shadow here, maybe even some in the foreground. It might be tough to see. There we go. Oh, there's some nice ones in there. Some light ones, some dark ones, even in between your little canopies here. You could put them on before the highlights or after. Either way can work. There we go. I think we got ourselves a finished painting. One little tap just to cover the foots of that tree. There it is. And what should I do here? Well, since it's a nice dark painting, I'll use a nice light color. And right down here, a little T and an S, a little 2 and a 5. There we go. I hope you guys enjoyed that painting. And I'll see you in the next video.